Hello, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing good. So today I wanted to cover a particular type of Hoover that your narc parents might employ to get you to break no contact, and why you basically shouldn't care enough to fall for it. And that's the sympathy fishing / medical emergency Hoover. This is a particular favourite of aging narcs, and they rely on the blood is thicker than water / you only get one set of parents, respect your elders, societal pressure. So to start, I want you to think back to any legitimate crises or emergencies that you had and what happened when you reached out to your parents for support. I'm willing to bet it was at best indifference. Narcs lack empathy and legitimately don't care about anyone's feelings and circumstances other than their own. I'm betting you heard more than once that you're being dramatic and self-absorbed. You're self-centered, clingy, needy and manipulative, purely because you're stealing focus from them by having the audacity to be seriously ill, dealing with a bereavement or facing a divorce. The thing with narcs is they see people as objects, even their own children. So as long as that object is fulfilling their needs, for example, you've got a successful career that they can use for "she gets her talent from me" bragging rights, they'll keep you around. The minute that object, aka you, is no longer useful or is broken in some way, for example, you lose that job, they couldn't be less interested. They're not willing to provide support or help because there's nothing in it for them, but guaranteed that to outsiders, the narcs will use your crisis as sympathy fuel for themselves. They also take pleasure in your misfortune because it bolsters their superiority complex. They like it when we're down because that's how they feel about themselves all the time. They have to elevate themselves. So when anything bad happens to us, that's an awesome time for the narc. So one incident in my life that I think illustrates this really well was when I was in an accident about 20 years ago. And I went back to my flat after it happened. And while I was in agony, I figured it was nothing major and I tried to ignore it. That's what years of brainwashing will do when you're brought up by parents that constantly minimise and one-up you. So after a couple of days, and with the working week ahead, I realised there was something very wrong with my leg. And I called my mother, who's a retired nurse, for advice, and her response was, "Oh, you've just sprained your ankle, there's no need to make a song and dance." And then she switched the conversation to the latest feud she'd started with her neighbours. And by that evening I officially panicked, so I got a cab to the hospital. I got an x-ray and I waited, and while in the busy waiting room, another patient saw how much pain I was in and tried to help by running back and forth to the bathroom, soaking loads of paper towels in water and using those as a kind of makeshift ice pack, which was unbelievably kind. And this is a stranger. They showed more care than my own mother. And when I finally saw a doctor, they started by just looking at me with a look of horror and bewilderment. And he said, "Basically, you shattered your ankle, and because you left it so long before getting help, it's going to be a big surgery to fix it." And he said that my attitude, namely, "Oh, if I ignore it, it'll sort itself out," was the attitude he saw in elderly people with that World War II, "don't make a fuss and man up" mindset. So I found myself on a hospital ward, freaking out, worrying I might lose my foot. And I called my mother to update her, and she couldn't have been less interested. Her neighbour had committed crimes against bedding plants, so this was the focus of her concern. And I was in hospital for a week, and when I was released I had to endure the humiliation of travelling back to my flat in the hospital shuttle bus they use for people with no relatives to collect them. And I mentioned in a previous video that I recently reconnected with a long-lost auntie, and she told me she remembered that time, and she was horrified to learn from my grandmother, her mother, that when she asked my mother if she was going to visit me, my mother's response was, "Well, I'm not an orthopaedic surgeon, am I? So there's no point." She just didn't get that you visit people when they're ill, out of care and kindness. She didn't get it. There was nothing in it for her, so she didn't care. I also learned that my mother had been telling anyone who'd listen that her daughter had been in a terrible accident and how it was such a worry for her. Unbelievable. She was using it for sympathy. Narcs will do anything to exploit your misery to get sympathy fuel for themselves, martyr complex in full force, without actually helping us. And this is just one of many incidents that sent a clear message to me that I cannot rely on my parents for anything, so why bother asking for support? And so that brings us to today's topic, why you shouldn't care when your narcs try to get you to break no contact with a medical emergency Hoover. I've mentioned before my mother is a malingerer who fakes illness for sympathy. She's obsessed with all things disease and injury related, so every day it would be something new, and I was the narc supply source that entertained this obsession. In fact, it was this aspect of her narcissism that triggered her silent treatment, that triggered my no contact. My golden child brother, he only ever contacts me when he wants something. And last spring he phoned me to whine about his love life. He's quite the psychomagnet, as every girlfriend he's ever had has been a younger version of my mother, which is so gross. So during this one-sided phone call, I snapped and I said, you need to take some of the burden of Mum's Munchausen's BS, because I can't do it anymore. And the next thing I know, my mother launches what would be her last dose of silent treatment. I'd ripped off that part of her mask and exposed her, so I had to be punished. And since going no contact with her and my flying monkey brother and father, it's been quiet, but I'm fully anticipating a crisis Hoover, and knowing my family, it'll be medical in nature. My mother's a pathological liar, and guaranteed any medical emergency will be at best fake, at worst hugely over-exaggerated. And in my head, my response will be, well, I'm not a surgeon, so there's nothing I can do about it. And I'll continue my no contact. So don't be duped into breaking your no contact the next time your narc's dog dies or marriage fails or they get hit by an ice cream truck. You and I know that if it was us in those situations, our narcs wouldn't care a jot. Don't let fear, obligation, guilt, and societal pressure force you to be the dutiful son or daughter. It's not your problem. Something else that you should know is that as a consequence of the way narcs unnaturally twist the structure of their brains to maintain their various masks and webs of lies, their risk of dementia is dramatically increased. Caring for a narc with dementia is something that should only be done by professionals who have the skills and the emotional distance required to deal with these monstrous creatures. Get out as soon as you can to avoid being the narc's old age bum wiper. Their miserable twilight years are karma in action and payback for the decades of abuse that we've endured. If that makes us callous and evil in the eyes of outsiders, just hold on to the knowledge that you know your truth. You don't need to justify your decisions to randoms. Other people's opinions of you are none of your business, as the saying goes. It's time to prioritize your sanity and your happiness. So, with that, look after yourself, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.